May our Father, Messiah, and Holy Spirit be with us. Trying to see if I can put the phone. Okay, there we go. See if I can turn a little bit more. Okay, cool. So I'm in the gym right now. It's easier for me to just come in here. I'm in the morning, nobody else is in here right now. Brother just left. He was talking to me about a Christian podcast that he listens to. They say he listens to the early morning for motivation. I'm just like, okay. I just pray that whoever that is you're listening to is righteous. And just being an obedient brother. The lighting right here is kind of off. Hold on. Hold on, brothers and sisters. Brother City, yeah. I ain't even gonna make it complicated than what it needs to be. I just pray you all can hear me. Yeah, we got one Kings. I'm actually very excited to be in Kings. King David was now old, advanced in years, and though they covered him with bedcloths, he never felt warm. His courtiers said to him, "Let a young virgin be sought for my master the king to wait upon your majesty, and be his attendant, and let her lie in your bosom, and my master the king will be warm." So they looked for a beautiful girl throughout the territory of Israel. They found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The girl was exceedingly beautiful. She became the king's attendant and waited upon him. But the king was not intimate with her. Now Adoniah, son of Haggith, went about boasting, "I will be king." He provided himself with chariots and horses and an escort of 50 outrunners. His father had never scolded him. "Why did you do that?" He was the one born after Absalom, and like him was very handsome. That's a blessing that our brother had some handsome children. He conferred with Joab, son of Zeruiah, and with the priest Abiathar, and they supported Adoniah. But the priest Zadok, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, the prophet Nathan, Shemaiah, and Reah, and David's own fighting men did not side with Adoniah. Adoniah made a sacrificial feast of sheep, oxen, and fatlings at the Zoheleth stone, which is near En-Rogid. He invited all his brother, princes, and all the king's courtiers of the tribe of Yehudah. But he did not invite the prophet Nathan or Benaiah or the fighting men or his brother Solomon. That's something to note because I believe our brother Solomon talks about that. Then Nathan said to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, "You must have heard that Adoniah, son of Haggith, has assumed the kingship without the knowledge of our master David. Now take my advice so that you may save your life and the life of your son Solomon. Go immediately to the king David and say to him, 'Did not you, O master king, swear to your maiden servant, your son Solomon shall swear to your maidservant, your son Solomon shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit upon my throne? Then why has Adoniah become king, while you are still there talking with the king? I will come in after you and confirm your words." So Bathsheba went to the king in his chamber. The king was very old, and Abishag the Shunammite was waiting on the king. Bathsheba bowed low in homage to the king, and the king asked, "What troubles you?" She answered, "My master, you yourself swore to your maidservant by our Father in heaven, your Elohim, your son Solomon shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit upon my throne. Yet now Adoniah has become king, and you, my master the king, know nothing about it. He has prepared a sacrificial feast of a great many oxen, fatlings, and sheep, and he has invited up the king's sons and Abiathar the priest and Joab, commander of the army, but he has not invited your servant Solomon. And so the eyes of all Israel are upon you, O master king, to tell them who shall succeed my master the king on the throne. Otherwise, when my master the king lies down with his fathers, my son Solomon, and I will be regarded as traitor." She was still talking to the king when the prophet Nathan arrived. They announced to the king, "The prophet Nathan is here," and he entered the king's presence. Bowing low to the king with his face to the ground, Nathan said, "O master king, you must have said, Adoniah shall succeed me as king, and he shall sit upon my throne. He has gone down today and prepared a sacrificial feast of a great many oxen, fatlings, and sheep. He invited all the king's sons and the army officers and Abiathar the priest. At this very moment they are eating and drinking with him, and they are shouting, Long live King Adonijah. But he did not invite me, your servant, or the priest Zadok, or Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, or your servant Solomon. Then his decision have come from my master the king without your telling. Your servant, who was to succeed to the throne of my master the king, that was responsible, summoned Bathsheba. She entered the king's presence and stood before the king. And the king took an oath, saying, As our Father in heaven lives, who has rescued me from every trouble, the oath I swore to you by our Father in heaven, the Elohim of Israel, that your son Solomon shall succeed me as king, and that he should sit upon my throne in my stead. I will fulfill this very day. Bathsheba bowed low and homage to the king with her face to the ground. She said, May my master King David live forever. Then King David said, Summon to me the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. When they came before the king said to them, Take my loyal soldiers and have my son Solomon ride on my mule and bring him down to Gihon. With the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan, anoint him there king over Israel. Whereupon you shall sound the horn and shout, Long live King Solomon. Then march up after him and let him come in and sit on my throne, for he shall succeed me as king. Him I designate to be ruler of Israel. And Yehuda, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, spoke up and said to the king, Amen. And may our Father, the Elohim of my master, the king, so ordain, as our Father in heaven was with my master, the king. So may he be with Solomon, and may he exalt his throne even higher than the throne of my master, King David. Amen. Then the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan and Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went down with the Cherethites and the Pelethites. They had Solomon ride on King David's mule, and they led him to Gihon. The priest Zadok took the horn of oil from the tent and anointed Solomon. They sounded the horn, and all the people shouted, Long live King Solomon. And the people then marched up behind him, playing on flutes and making merry till the earth was split open by the uproar. Wow. Adonijah and all the guests who were with him, who had just finished eating, heard it. When Joab heard the sound of the horn, he said, Why is the city in such an uproar? He was still speaking when the priest Jonathan, son of Abiathar, come in, said Adonijah, You are a worthy man, and you surely bring good news. But Jonathan replied to Adonijah, Alas, our master King David has made Solomon king. The king sent with him the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and the Cherethites and Pelethites. They had him ride on the king's mule, and the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anointed him king at Gihon. Then they came up from there making merry, and the city went into an uproar. That's the noise you heard. Further, Solomon seated himself on the royal throne. Further, the king's courtiers came to congratulate our master King David, saying, May Elohim make the renown of Solomon even greater than yours, and may he exalt his throne even higher than yours. And the king bowed low on his couch. And further, this was what the king said, Praise be our Father in heaven, the Elohim of Israel, who has this day provided a successor to my throne, while my own eyes can see it. Thereupon all of Adonijah's guests rose in alarm, and each went his own way. Adonijah, in fear of Solomon, went at once to the tent and grasped the horns of the altar. It was reported to Solomon, Adonijah is in fear of King Solomon and has grasped the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon first swear to me that he will not put his servant to the sword. Solomon said, If he behaves worthily, not a hair of his head shall fall to the ground. But if he is caught in any offense, he shall die. So King Solomon sent and had him taken down from the altar. He came and bowed before King Solomon. And Solomon said to him, Go home. When David's life was drawn to a close, he instructed his son Solomon as follows. I am going the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man. Keep the charge of our Father and having your Elohim, walking in his ways and following his laws, his commandments, his rules, and his admonitions, as recorded in the teaching of Moshe, in order that you may succeed in whatever you undertake and wherever you turn. Amen. Then our Father in heaven will fulfill the promise that he made concerning me. If your descendants are scrupulous in their conduct and walk before me faithfully with all their heart and soul, your line on the throne of Israel shall never end. Further, you know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, what he did to the commanders of Israel's forces, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Yether. He killed them, shedding blood of war in peacetime, staining the girdle of his loins and the sandals on his feet with blood of war. So act in accordance with your wisdom and see that his white hair does not go down to Sheol in peace. But deal graciously with the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, for they befriended me when I fled from your brother Absalom. Let them be among those that eat at your table. You must also deal with Shemaiah, son of Geriah the Benjamite from Baharim. He insulted me outrageously when I was on my way to Mahanaim, but he came down to meet me at the Jordan. And I swore to him by our Father in heaven, I will not put you to the sword, so do not let him go unpunished. For you are a wise man, and you will know how to deal with him and send his gray hair down to Sheol in blood. So David slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David. The length of David's reign over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron, and he reigned 33 years in Jerusalem. And Solomon sat upon the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Adonijah, son of Haggith, came to see Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She said, "Do you come with friendly intent?" "Yes," he replied. And he continued, "I would like to have a word with you. Speak up," she said. Then he said, "You know that the kingship was rightly mine and all that Israel and that all Israel wanted me to reign, but the kingship passed on to my brother. It came to him by the will of our Father in heaven, and now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." She said, "Speak up." He replied, "Please ask King Solomon, for he won't refuse you to give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife." "Very well," said Bathsheba. "I will speak to the king in your behalf." So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him about Adoniah. The king rose to greet her and bowed down to her. The king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. Wow, he bowed down to his mommy. He sat on his throne. And he had a throne placed for the queen mother, beautiful, and she sat on his right. So she said, "I have one small request to make of you. Do not refuse me." He responded, "As mother, I shall not refuse you." Then she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to your brother Adoniah as wife." The king replied to his mother, "Why request Abishag the Shunammite for Adoniah? Request the kingship for him. For he is my oldest brother, and the priest Abiathar and Joab son of Zariah are on his side." Thereupon King Solomon swore by our Father in heaven, saying, "So may Elohim do to me, and even more, if broaching this matter does not cost Adoniah his life. Now as our Father in heaven lives, who has established me and set me on the throne of my father David, and who has provided him with a house and who has provided him with a house as he promised. Adoniah shall be put to death this very day." And Solomon instructed Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, who struck Adoniah down, and so he died. The priest, after the king said, "Go to your estate at Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I shall not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of my master, because you carried the ark of my father Elohim for my father David, and because you shared all the hardships that my father endured." So Solomon dismissed Abiathar from his office, a priest of our Father in heaven, thus fulfilling what our Father in heaven has spoken at Shiloh regarding the house of Eli. When the news reached Joab, he fled to the tent of our Father in heaven and grasped the horns of the altar, for Joab had sided with Adoniah, though he had not sided with Absalom. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of our Father in heaven, and that he was there by the altar. So Solomon sent Benaiah, saying, "Go and strike him down." Benaiah went to the tent of our Father in heaven and said to him, "Thus said the king, come out." "No," he replied, "I would die here." But Benaiah reported back to the king that Joab had answered thus and thus. And the king said, "Do just as he said, strike him down and bury him, and remove guilt from me and my father's house for the blood of the innocent that Joab has shed." Thus our Father in heaven will bring his blood guilt down upon his own head, because unbeknown to my father he struck down with the sword 2 men more righteous and honorable than he, Abner son of Ner, the army commander of Israel, and Amasa son of Yether, the army commander of Yehuda. May the guilt for their blood come down upon the head of Joab and his descendants forever, and may good fortune from our Father in heaven be granted forever to David and his descendants, his house and his throne. Amen. So Benaiah son of Jehoiada went up and struck him down, and he was buried at his home in the wilderness. In this place the king appointed Benaiah son of Jehoiada over the army, and in place of Abiathar the king appointed the priest Zadok. Then the king summoned Shemaiah and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem, and stay there. Do not ever go out from there anywhere else. On the very day that you go out and cross the Wadi Kidron, you can be sure that you will die. Your blood shall be on your own head." "That is fair," said Shemaiah to the king. "Your servant will do just as my master the king has spoken." And for a long time Shemaiah remained in Jerusalem. 3 years later, 2 slaves of Shemaiah ran away to King Ashik, son of Maacah of Gath. Shemaiah was told his slaves are in Gath. Shemaiah thereupon saddled his donkey and went to Ashish in Gath to claim his slaves. And Shemaiah returned from Gath with his slaves. Solomon was told that Shemaiah had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and back, and the king summoned Shemaiah and said to him, "Did I not adjure you by our Father in heaven and warn you? On the very day that you leave and go anywhere else, you can be sure that you will die. And did you not say to me, 'It is fair, I accept'? Why did you not abide by the oath before our Father in heaven and by the orders which I gave you?" The king said further to Shemaiah, "You know all the wrong which you remember very well that you did to my father David. Now our Father in heaven brings down your wrongdoing upon your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before our Father in heaven forever." The king gave orders to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he went on and struck Shemaiah down, and so he died. Thus the kingdom was secured in Solomon's hands. Solomon aligned himself by marriage with Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, Egypt. He married Pharaoh's daughter and brought her to the city of David to live there until he had finished building his palace in the house of our Father in heaven and the walls around Jerusalem. The people, however, continued to offer sacrifices at the open shrines because up to that time no house had been built for the name of our Father in heaven. And Solomon, though he loved our Father in heaven and followed the practices of his father David, also sacrificed and offered at the shrines. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the largest shrine on that altar. Solomon presented 1,000 burnt offerings at Gibeon. Our Father in heaven appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and Elohim said, "Ask what shall I grant you?" Solomon said, "You dealt most graciously with your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness and righteousness and integrity of heart. You have continued this great kindness to him by giving him a son to occupy his throne, as is now the case. And now, O our Father in heaven, my Elohim, you have made your servant king. You have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am a young lad with no experience in leadership. Your servant finds himself in the midst of the people. You have chosen a people too numerous to be numbered or counted. Grant then your servant an understanding mind to judge your people, to distinguish between good and bad. For who can judge this vast people of yours?" Man, wow! I pray the same even for myself. I pray that your servant may have an understanding mind to just be righteous and to distinguish between good and bad. Amen. Who can judge this vast people of yours? Our Father in heaven was pleased that Solomon had asked for this, and Elohim said to him, "Because you asked for this, you did not ask for long life, you did not ask for riches, you did not ask for the life of your enemies, but you asked for discernment and dispensing justice. I now do as you have spoken. I grant you a wise and discerning mind." That's a blessing. There has never been anyone like you before, nor will anyone like you ever rise again. And I also grant you what you did not ask for, both riches and glory. All your life, the like of which no king has ever had. And I will further grant you long life if you will walk in my ways and observe my laws and commandments, as did your father David. Then Solomon awoke. It was a dream. He went to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the covenant of our Father in heaven, and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented offerings of well-being, and he made a banquet for all his courtiers. Later 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The first woman said, "Please, my master, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. On the 3rd day after I was delivered, this woman also gave birth to a child. We were alone. There was no one else with us in the house, just the 2 of us in the house. During the night, this woman's child died because she lay on it. She arose in the night and took my son from my side while your maidservant was asleep, and laid him in her bosom, and she laid her dead son in my bosom. When I arose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, it was not the son I had born." The other woman spoke up, No, the live one is my son, and that dead one is yours." But the first insisted, "No, the dead boy is yours. Mine is the live one." And they went on arguing before the king. The king said, "One says, 'This is my son, the live one, and the dead one is yours.' And the other says, 'No, the dead boy is yours. Mine is the live one.' So the king gave the order, 'Fetch me a sword.' A sword was brought before the king. And the king said, 'Cut the live child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other.' But the woman whose son was the live one pleaded with the king, for she was overcome with compassion for her son. 'Please, my master,' she cried, 'give her the live child, only don't kill it.' The other insisted, it shall be neither yours nor mine. Cut it in 2. Then the king spoke up, 'Give the live child to her,' he said, 'and do not put it to death. She is his mother.' When all Israel heard the decision that the king had rendered, they stood in awe of the king, for they saw that he possessed divine wisdom to execute justice. Facts. King Solomon was now king over all Israel. These were his officials: Azariah, son of Zadok, the priest; Elihareph and Ahiah, sons of Shishai; scribe Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud; recorder Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army; Zadok and Abiathar, priest; Azariah, son of Nathan, in charge of the prefects; Zabud, son of Nathan, the priest, companion of the king; Ahishur, in charge of the palace; and Adoniraim, son of Abda, in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 12 prefects governing all Israel, who provided food for the king and his household. Each had to provide food for 1 month in the year. And these were their names: Ben-Hur, in the hill country of Ephraim; Ben-Deker, and Makaz, Shabim, Beth Shemesh, and Elan, Beth Hanan, Ben-Hesed, and Arabath. He governed Socho, in all the Hefer area; Ben-Abinadab, and all of Naphat Dor; Solomon's daughter Taphath was his wife. Solomon's daughter Taphath. Solomon's daughter Taphath was all of Naphath, Dor, Solomon's daughter Taphath. Taphath was his wife. Bana, son of Ahilud, in Tanakh, in Megiddo, and all Beth Shean, which is beside Zeratan, below Jezreel, from Ber Shean to Abel Mahola, as far as the other side of Yakamim. Ben Gebor, in Ramoth Gilead, he governed the villages of Yair, son of Manasseh, which are in Gilead, and he also governed the district of Argob, which is in Bashan, 60 large towns with walls and bronze bars. Ahinadab, son of Ido, in Mahanaim, Ahiamaz, in Naphtali, he too took a daughter of Solomon, Basamath, to wife Banah, son of Hushai, in Asher, in Bealoth, Yehoshaphat, son of Parua, in Issachar, Shemaiah, son of Eli, and Benjamin, Geber, son of Uri, in the region of Gilead, the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and one prefect was in the land. Yehuda and Israel were as numerous as the sands of the sea. They ate and drank and were content. Solomon's rule extended over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines and the boundary of Egypt. They brought Solomon tribute and were subject to him all his life. Solomon's daily provisions consisted of 30 cores semolina, and 60 cores of ordinary flour, 10 fattened oxen, 20 pasture-fed oxen, and 100 sheep and goats. Besides deer and gazelles, roebucks, and fattened geese, for he controlled the whole region west of the Euphrates. All the kings west of the Euphrates from Tifsah to Gaza, and he had peace on all his borders round about all the days of Solomon. Yehuda and Israel from Dan to Beersheba dwelt in safety, everyone under his own vine and under his own fig tree. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariotry, and 12,000 horsemen. All those prefects, each during his month, would furnish provisions for King Solomon, and for all who were admitted to King Solomon's table, they did not fall short in anything. They would also each in his turn deliver barley and straw for the horses and the swift steeds to the places where they were stationed. Our Father in heaven endowed Solomon with wisdom and discernment in great measure, with understanding as vast as the sands on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the Canaanites, and than all the wisdom of the Mitzrayim. He was the wisest of all men. He was the wisest of all men, wiser than Ethan, the Israelite, and Haman, Shakol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. His fame spread among all the surrounding nations. He composed 3,000 proverbs, and his songs number 1,005. He discoursed about trees, from the cedar in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. And he discoursed about beasts, birds, creeping things, and fishes, men of all peoples, giving to his Solomon's wisdom sent by all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. It's a blessing that we actually have these proverbs and some of these songs. This is amazing. And then King Aram of Tyre sent his official to Solomon when he heard that he had been anointed king in place of his father. For Aram had always been a friend of David, Solomon sent this message to Aram. You know that my father David could not build a house for the name of our Father in heaven is Elohim because of the enemies that encompassed him, until our Father in heaven had placed them under the soles of his feet. But now our Father in heaven, my Elohim, has given me respite all around. There is no adversary and no mischance. And so I propose to build a house for the name of our Father in heaven, my Elohim, as our Father in heaven promised my father David, saying, your son whom I will set on your throne in your place shall build the house for my name. Please then give orders for cedars to be cut for me in the Lebanon. My servants will work with yours, and I will pay you any wages. You may ask for your servants, for as you know, there is none among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians. When Aram heard Solomon's message, he was overjoyed. Praised be our Father in heaven this day, he said, for granting David a wise son to govern this great people. So Aram sent word to Solomon, I have your message. I will supply with the cedar and cypress logs you require, my servants will bring them down to the sea from the Lebanon, and at the sea I will make them into floats, and deliver them to any place that you designate to me. There I shall break them up for you to carry away. You in turn will supply the food I require for my household. So Hiram kept Solomon provided with all the cedar and cypress wood he required, and Solomon delivered to Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as provisions for his household, and 20 cores of beaten oil. Such was Solomon's annual payment to Hiram. Our Father in heaven had given Solomon wisdom as he had promised him. There was friendship between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. King Solomon imposed forced labor on all Israel. The levy came to 3,000 men. He sent them to the Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month. They would spend 1 month in the Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon also had 70,000 porters and 80,000 couriers in the hills, apart from Solomon's 3,300 officials who were in charge of the work and supervised the gangs doing the work. The king ordered huge blocks of choice stone to be quarried, so that the foundations of the house might be laid with hewn stones. Hiram's masons and the men of Gilboa shaped them. Thus the timber and the stones for building the house were made ready. In the 480th year after the Israelites left the land of Mizraim, in the month of Ziph, that is the second month, in the 4th year of his reign over Israel, Solomon began to build the house of our Father in heaven. The house which King Solomon built for our Father in heaven was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The portico in front of the great hall of the house was 20 cubits long along the width of the house, and 10 cubits deep to the front of the house. He made windows for the house, recessed and laticked against the outside wall of the house. The outside wall of the house enclosing the great hall and the shrine, he built a storage structure, and he made side chambers all around. The lowest story was 5 cubits wide, the middle one 6 cubits wide, and the third 7 cubits wide, for he had provided recesses around the outside of the house so as not to penetrate the walls of the house. When the house was built, only finished stones cut at the quarry were used, so that no hammer or axe or any iron tool was heard in the house while it was being built. The entrance to the middle story of the side chambers was on the right side of the house, and winding stairs led up to the middle chambers, and from the middle chambers to the third story. When he finished building the house, he paneled the house with beams and planks of cedar. He built the story structure against the entire house, each story 5 cubits high, so that it encased the house with timbers of cedar. Then the word of our Father in heaven came to Solomon: with regard to this house you are building, if you follow my laws and observe my rules and faithfully keep my commandments, I will fulfill for you the promise that I gave to your father David. I will abide among the children of Israel, and I will never forsake my people Israel. When Solomon had completed the construction of the house, he paneled the walls of the house on the inside with planks of cedar. He also overlaid the walls on the inside with wood from the floor of the house to the ceiling, and he overlaid the floor of the house with planks of cypress 20 cubits from the rear of the house. He built a partition of cedar planks from the floor to the walls. He furnished its interior to serve as a shrine, as the Holy of Holies. The front part of the house, that is the great hall, measured 40 cubits. The cedar of the interior of the house had carvings of gourds and calyxes. It was all cedar. No stone was exposed. In the innermost part of the house, he fixed a shrine in which to place the ark of our Father in heaven's covenant. The interior of the shrine was 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 20 cubits high. He overlaid it with solid gold. He similarly overlaid its cedar altar. Solomon overlaid the interior of the house with solid gold, and he inserted golden chains into the door of the shrine. He overlaid the shrine with gold, so that the entire house was overlaid with gold. He even overlaid with gold the entire altar of the shrine, and so the entire house was completed. In the shrine, he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. One had a wing measuring 5 cubits, and another wing measuring 5 cubits, so that the spread from wingtip to wingtip was 10 cubits. And the wing spread of the other cherub was also 10 cubits. The 2 cherubim had the same measurements and proportions. The height of the one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was that of the other cherub. He placed the cherubim inside the inner chamber, since the wings of the cherubim were extended. A wing of the one touched one wall, and a wing of the other touched the other wall, while the wings in the center of the chamber would touch each other. He overlaid the cherubim with gold all over the walls of the house, of both the inner area and the outer area, and he carved reliefs of cherubim, palms, and calyx, and he overlaid the floor of the house with gold, both the inner and the outer areas. For the entrance of the shrine, he made doors of olive wood. The pilasters and the doorposts, having 5 sides of double doors, were of olive wood, and on them he carved reliefs of cherubim, palms, and calyxes. He overlaid them with gold, hammering the gold onto the cherubim and the palms for the entrance of the great hall. For the entrance of the great hall. 2, he made doorposts of oleaster wood, having 4 sides, and the double doors of cypress wood, each door consisting of 2 rounded planks. On them he carved cherubim, palms, and calyxes, overlaying them with gold, applied evenly over the carvings. He built the inner enclosure of 3 courts of hewn stones and 1 course of cedar beams. In the 4th year, in the month of Ziph, the foundations of the house were laid. And in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, that is the 8th month, the house was completed according to all its details and all its specifications. It took him 7 years to build it, and it took Solomon 13 years to build his palace until his whole place was completed. He built 11 and 4 his house with 4 rows of cedar columns and with hewn cedar beams above the columns. Its length was 100 cubits, its breadth of 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. It was paneled along with above the cedar with the planks that were above on the 45 columns, 15 in each row. And there were 3 rows of window frames with 3 tiers of windows facing each other. All the doorways and doorposts had square frames with 3 tiers of windows facing each other. He made the portico of columns 50 cubits long and 30 cubits wide. The portico was in front of the columns, and there were columns with the canopy in front of them. He made the throne portico where he was to pronounce judgment, the hall of judgment. It was paneled with cedar from floor to floor. The house that he used as a residence in the rear courtyard back of the portico was of the same construction Solomon also constructed a palace like that portico for the daughter of Pharaoh, whom he had married. All those buildings, from foundation to coping and on the way out to the great courtyard, were of choice stones, hewn according to measure, smooth on all sides. The foundations were huge blocks of choice stones of 10 cubits, and stones of 8 cubits, and above were choice stones, hewn according to measure, and cedar wood. The large surrounding courtyard had 3 tiers of hewn stone, and a row of cedar beams, the same as for the inner court of the house of our father in heaven, and for the portico of the house. King Solomon sent for Hiram and brought him down from Tyre. He was the son of a widow of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father had been a Tyrian, a coppersmith. He was endowed with skill, ability, and talent for executing all work in bronze. He came to King Solomon and executed all his work. He cast 2 columns of bronze. One column was 18 cubits high and measured 12 cubits in circumference, and similarly the other column he made 2 capitals cast in bronze to be set upon the 2 columns, the height of each of the 2 capitals being 5 cubits. Also nets of meshwork with festons of chainwork for the capitals that were on the top of the columns, 7 for each of the 2 capitals. He made the columns so that there were 2 rows of pomegranates encircling the top of the one network to cover the capitals that were on the top of the pomegranates, and he did the same for the network on the second capital. The capitals upon the columns of the portico were of lily design, 4 cubits high, so also the capitals upon the 2 columns extended above and next to the bulge that was beside the network. There were 200 pomegranates and rows around the 2 of the second capital. He set up the columns at the portico of the great hall. He set up one column on the right and named it Jachin, and he set up the other column on the left and named it Boaz. Upon the top of the columns there was a lily design. Thus the work of the columns was completed. Then he made the tank of cast metal, 10 cubits across from brim to brim. Completely round, it was 5 cubits high, and it measured 30 cubits in circumference. There were gourds below the brim, completely encircling it, 10 to a cubit encircling the tank. The gourds were in 2 rows, cast in one piece with it. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east, with the tank resting upon them. Their hunks were all Their hunks were all turned inward. It was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was made like that of a cup, like the petals of a lily. Its capacity was 2,000 baths. He made the 10 laver stands of bronze. The length of each laver stand was 4 cubits, and the width 4 cubits, and the height was 3 cubits. The structure of the laver stands was as follows. They had insets, and there were insets within the frames, and on the insets within the frames were lions, oxen, and cherubim. Above the frames was a stand, and both above and below the lions and the oxen were spirals of hammered metal. Each laver stand had 4 bronze wheels and 2 bronze axle trees. Its 4 legs had bracelets. Its 4 legs had brackets. The brackets were under the laver cast with spirals. Beyond each, its funnel within the crown rose a cubit above it. This funnel was round in the fashion of a stand, a cubit and a half in diameter. On the funnel too there were carvings, but the insets were square, not round. And below the insets were the four wheels. The axle trees of the wheels were fixed in the laver stand. And the height of each wheel was a cubit and a half. The structure of the wheels was like the structure of chariot wheels. And the axle trees, the rims, their spokes, and the hubs were all of cast metal. Four brackets ran to the four corners of each laver stand. The brackets were of a piece with the laver stand. At the top of the laver stand was a round band half a cubit high, and together with the top of the laver stand, its sides and its insets were of one piece with it. On its surface, on its sides, and on its insets, Hiram engraved cherubim, lions, and palms as the clear space on each allowed with spirals round about. It was after this manner that he made the 10 laver stands, all of them cast alike of the same measure and the same form. Then he made 10 bronze lavers, one laver on each of the 10 laver stands, each laver measuring 4 cubits, and each laver containing 40 baths. He dispossessed the laver stands, 5 at the right side of the house and 5 at his left side, and the tank he placed on the right side of the house. At the southeast corner, Hiram also made the lavers, the scrapers, and the sprinkling bowls. So Hiram finished all the work that he had been doing for King Solomon on the house of our Father in heaven. The 2 columns, the 2 globes of the capitals upon the columns, and the 2 pieces of network to cover the 2 globes of the capitals upon the columns. The 400 pomegranates for the 2 pieces of network, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network to cover the 2 globes of the capitals upon the columns. The 10 stands and the 10 lavers upon the stands. The 1 tank with the 12 oxen underneath the tank, the pails, the scrapers, and the sprinkling bowls. All those vessels in the house of our Father in heaven that Hiram made for King Solomon were burnished bronze. The king had them cast in earthen molds in the plain of the Jordan between Zakoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all the vessels unweighed because of their very great quantity. The weight of the bronze was not reckoned, and Solomon made all the furnishings that were in the house of our Father in heaven: the altar of gold, the table for the bread of display of gold, the lampstands, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, in front of the shrine of solid gold, and the petals, lamps, and tongs of gold, the bass and snuffers, sprinkling bowls, ladders, and fire pans of solid gold, and the hinged sockets for the doors of the innermost part of the house, the Holy of Holies, and for the doors of the great hall of the house of gold. When all the work that King Solomon had done in the house of our Father in heaven was completed, Solomon brought in the sacred donation of his father David, the silver, the gold, and the vessels, and deposited them in the treasury of the house of our Father in heaven. Then Solomon convoked the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the ancestral chieftains of the Israelites before King Solomon in Jerusalem to bring up the ark of the covenant of our Father in heaven from the city of David, that is Zion. All the men of Israel gathered before King Solomon at the feast in the month of Ethanim, that is the 7th month. When all the elders of Israel had come, the priests lifted the ark and carried up the ark of our Father in heaven. Then the priests and the Levites brought the tent of meeting and all the holy vessels that were in the tent. Meanwhile, King Solomon and the whole community of Israel who were assembled with him before the ark were sacrificing sheep and oxen in such abundance that they could not be numbered or counted. The priests brought the ark of our Father in heaven's covenant to its place underneath the wings of the cherubim in the shrine of the house. In the Holy of Holies, for the cherubim had their wings spread out over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim shielded the ark and its poles from above. The poles projected so that the ends of the poles were visible in the sanctuary in front of the shrine, but they could not be seen outside it, and there they remain to this day. There was nothing inside the ark but the 2 tablets of stone which Moshe placed there at Horeb when our Father in heaven made a covenant with the Israelites after their departure from the land of Mitzrayim. When the priest came out of the sanctuary, for the cloud had filled the house of our Father in heaven, and the priests were not able to remain and perform the service because of the cloud, for the presence of our Father in heaven filled the house of our Father in heaven. Then Solomon declared, our Father in heaven has chosen to abide in the thick cloud. I heard a loud noise. I don't know what that was. Our Father in heaven has chosen to abide in the thick cloud. I have now built for you a stately house, a place where you may dwell forever. Beautiful. Then with the whole congregation of Israel standing, the king faced about and blessed the whole congregation of Israel. He said, praise be our Father in heaven, the Elohim of Israel, who has fulfilled with deeds the promise he made to my father David. For he said, ever since I brought my people Israel out of Mitzrayim, I have not chosen a city among all the tribes of Israel for building a house where my name might abide, but I have chosen David to rule my people Israel. Now my father David had intended to build a house for the name of our Father in heaven, the Elohim of Israel. But our father never said to my father David, as regards your intention to build a house for my name, you did right to have that intention. However, you shall not build the house yourself. Instead, your son, the issue of your loins, shall build the house for my name. And our father in heaven has fulfilled the promise that he made. I have succeeded my father David and have ascended the throne of Israel. As our father in heaven promised, I have built the house for the name of our father in heaven, the Elohim of Israel, and I have set a place there for the ark containing the covenant which our father in heaven made with our fathers when he brought them out from the land of Mitzrayim. Then Solomon stood before the ark, before the altar of our Father in heaven, in the presence of the whole community of Israel. He spread the palms of his hands toward heaven and said, O our Father in heaven, Elohim Israel, in the heavens above and on the earth below, there is no mighty one like you who keep your gracious covenant with your servants when they walk before you in wholehearted devotion. You who have kept the promises you made to your servant, my father David, fulfilling with deeds the promise you made, as is now the case. And now, O our Father in heaven, Elohim Israel, keep the further promise that you made to your servant, my father David. Your line on the throne of Israel shall never end, if only your descendants will look to their way and walk before me as you have walked before me. Now, therefore, O Elohim Israel, let the promise that you made to your servant, my father David, be fulfilled. But will Elohim really dwell on earth? Even the heavens to the uttermost reaches cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? Yet turn, O our Father in heaven, Elohim, to the prayer and supplication of your servant, and hear the cry and prayer which your servant offers before you this day. May your eyes be open day and night toward this house, toward the place of which you have said, my name shall abide there. May you heed the prayers which your servant will offer toward this place. And when you hear the supplications which your servant and your people Israel offer toward this place, give heed in your heavenly abode. Give heed and pardon whenever one man commits an offense against another, and the latter utters an imprecation to bring a curse upon him, and comes with his imprecation before your altar in this house. O hear in heaven, and take action to judge your servants, condemning him who is in the wrong and bringing down the punishment of his conduct on his head, vindicating him who is in the right by rewarding him according to his righteousness. Should your people Israel be routed by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and then turn back to you and acknowledge your name, and they offer prayer and supplication to you in this house, O hear in heaven, and pardon the sin of your people Israel, and restore them to the land that you gave to their fathers. Should the heavens be shut up and there be no rain, because they have sinned against you, and then they pray toward this place and acknowledge your name and repent of their sins, when you answer them, O hear in heaven, and pardon the sin of your servants, your people Israel, after you have shown them the proper way in which they are to walk, and send down rain upon the land which you gave to your people as your heritage. So too, if there is a famine in the land, if there is pestilence, blight, mildew, locusts, or caterpillars, or if an enemy oppresses them in any of the settlements of the land, in any plague and in any disease, in any prayer or supplication of offered by any person among all your people Israel, each of whom knows his own affliction, when he spreads his palms toward the house, O hear in your heavenly abode, and pardon and take action, render to each man according to his ways, as you know his heart to be, for you alone know the hearts of all men, so that they may revere you all the days that they live on the land that you gave to our fathers. Or if a foreigner who is not of your people Israel comes from a distant land for the sake of your name, for they shall hear about your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm, when he comes to pray toward this house, O hear in your heavenly abode, and grant all that the foreigner asks you for. Thus all the peoples of the earth will know your name and revere you, as does your people Israel, and they will recognize that your name is attached to this house that I have built. When your people take the field against their enemy by whatever way you send them, and they pray to our Father in heaven in the direction of the city which you have chosen, and of the house which I have built to your name, O hear in heaven, their prayer and supplication, and uphold their cause when they sin against you. For there is no man who does not sin, and you are angry with them, and deliver them to the enemy, and the captives carry them off to an enemy land, near or far, and then they take it to heart in the land to which they have been carried off, and they repent and make supplication to you in the land of their captors, saying, we have sinned, we have acted perversely, we have acted wickedly, and they turn back to you with all their heart and soul in the land of the enemies who have carried them off, and they pray to you in the direction of their land which you gave to their fathers, of the city which you have chosen, and of the house which I have built to your name. O give heed in your heavenly abode to their prayer and supplication, uphold their cause, and pardon your people who have sinned against you for all the transgressions that they have committed against you. Grant them mercy in the sight of their captors, that they may be merciful to them, for they are your very own people, that you free from Mitzrayim, from the midst of the iron furnace. May your eyes be open to the supplication of your servant and the supplication of your people Israel, and may you heed them whenever they call upon you. For you, O our Father in heaven, Elohim, have set them apart for yourself from all the peoples of the earth as your very own, as you promised through Moshe your servant when you freed our fathers from Mitzrayim. When Solomon finished offering to our Father in heaven all this prayer and supplication, he rose from where he had been kneeling in front of the altar of our Father in heaven, his hands spread out toward heaven. He stood in a loud voice blessed the whole congregation of Israel. Praise be our Father in heaven, who has granted a haven to his people Israel, just as he promised. Not a single word has failed of all the gracious promises that he made through his servant Moshe. May our Father in heaven, Elohim, be with us as he was with our fathers. May he never abandon or forsaken us. May he incline our hearts to him, that we may walk in all his ways and keep the commandments, the laws, and the rules which he enjoined upon our fathers. And may these words of mine, which I have offered in supplication before our Father in heaven, be close to our Father in heaven, our Elohim, day and night, that he may provide for his servant and for his people Israel according to each day's needs. Amen. To the end that all the peoples of the earth may know that our Father in heaven alone is Elohim, there is no other. Amen. And may you be wholehearted with our Father in heaven, Elohim, to walk in his ways and keep his commandments even as now. Amen. The king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before our Father in heaven. Solomon offered 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep as sacrifices of well-being to our Father in heaven. Thus the king and all the Israelites dedicated the house of our Father in heaven. That day the king consecrated the center of the court that was in front of the house of our Father in heaven. For it was there that he presented the burnt offerings, the meal offerings, and the fat part of the offerings of well-being, is because the bronze altar that was before our Father in heaven was too small to hold the burnt offerings, the meal offerings, and the fat parts of the offerings of well-being. So Solomon and all Israel with him, a great assemblage coming from Lebo Hamath to the Wadi of Mitzrayim, observed the feast at that time before our Father in heaven, Elohim, 7 days, and again 7 days, 14 days in all. On the 8th day he let the people go. They bade the king goodbye and went to their homes joyful and glad of heart over all the goodness that our Father in heaven has shown through his servant Dawood and his people Israel. When Solomon had finished building the house of our Father in heaven and the royal palace and everything that Solomon had set his heart on constructing, our Father in heaven appeared to Solomon a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. Our Father in heaven said to him, I have heard the prayer and the supplication which you have offered to me. I consecrate this house which you have built, and I set my name there forever. My eyes and my heart shall ever be there. As for you, if you walk before me, as your father walked before me wholeheartedly and with uprightness, doing all that I have commanded you, and keeping my laws and my rules, then I will establish your throne of kingship over Israel forever. As I promised your father David, saying, your line on the throne of Israel shall never end. But if you and your descendants turn away from me and do not keep the commandments and the laws which I have set before you, and go and serve other mighty ones and worship them, then I will sweep, O Israel, off the land which I gave them. I will reject the house which I have consecrated to my name, and Israel shall become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. And as for this house, once so exalted, everyone passing by shall be appalled and shall hiss. And when they ask, why did our Father in heaven do this to the land and to this house, they shall be told, it is because they forsook our Father in heaven, the Elohim, who freed them from the land of Mitzrayim, and they embraced other mighty ones and worshipped them and served them. Therefore our Father in heaven has brought all this calamity upon them. At the end of the 20 years during which Solomon constructed the two buildings, our Father in heaven's house and the royal palace, since King Aram of Tyre had supplied Solomon with all the cedar and cypress timber and gold that he required, King Solomon in turn gave Aram 20 towns in the region of Galilee. But when Aram came from Tyre to inspect the towns that Solomon had given him, he was not pleased with them. My brother, he said, what sort of towns are these you have given me? So they were named the land of Kabul, as is still the case. However, Abraham sent the king 120 talents of gold. This was the purpose of the forced labor which Solomon imposed. It was to build the house of our Father in heaven, his own place, the Milo and the wall of Jerusalem, and to fortify Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, had come up and captured Gezer. He destroyed it by fire, killed the Canaanites who dwelt in the town, and gave it as dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. So Solomon fortified Gezer, Lower Beth Horon, Balith, and Tamar in the wilderness in the land of Yehuda, and all of Solomon's garrison towns, chariot towns, and cavalry towns, everything that Solomon set his heart on building in Jerusalem and in the Lebanon and throughout the territory that he ruled. All the people that were left of the Amorites, Hittites, and Perizzites, who were not of the Israelite stock, those of their descendants who remained in the land, and whom the Israelites were not able to annihilate, of these Solomon made a slave force, as is still the case. But he did not reduce any Israelites to slavery. They served rather as warriors and as attendants, officials, and officers, and as commanders of his chariots and cavalry. These were the prefects that were in charge of Solomon's works, and were foremen over the people engaged in the work, who numbered 550. As soon as Pharaoh's daughter went up from the city of David to the palace, they had built for her. He built the Milo. Solomon used to offer burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being 3 times a year on the altar that he had built for our Father in heaven. And he used to offer incense on the one that was before our Father in heaven, and he kept the house in repair. King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Ezen Geber, which is near Elath, on the shore of the Sea of Reeds in the land of Edom. Abraham sent servants of his with the fleet, mariners who were experienced on the sea, to serve with Solomon's men. They came to Ophir. There they obtained gold in the amount of 420 talents, which they delivered to King Solomon. Amen. Yeah, Father, and Son, Holy Spirit, will I pray that this was an edifying reading for you. It was definitely an edifying reading for me. Some water. I pray that you may all have a wonderful, beautiful, and blessed day. Amen.